Right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to the Oqtane Community Stand-Up. I guess this is the last community stand-up that we're going to have in 2025 because we're now in December. We started these community stand-ups in September um, and basically just evolved the former meetings that we had as sort of the Oqtane development team. For anyone who had contributed to the project, we had private meetings up until that point. And then in order to become more inclusive and allow more people to participate, we transformed these meetings into a public meeting. And that's we kicked off the community stands up in September. I've been trying to keep up with publishing the recordings of these meetings on YouTube and also publishing a summary of the meetings on the blog on Oqtane.org, and sending out notifications to subscribers so that people can keep up with the news that's happening around Oqtane. So the agenda today, we'll talk a bit about the most recent release. I have some news about upcoming events, and we can have some time for discussion. So the big news, I guess, was that the version 10 release came out on November the 14th. So that was always the plan, is to release Oqtane 10 at the same time as .NET 10. And so .NET 10 released in the week of November 11th through 14th, and that was at the same time as .NET Conf, which basically happens every year in November. The Oqtane 10 release had 77 pull requests, 169 commits, and those were contributed by 6 different contributors. And I've got the list of contributors outlined on the slide here. And so, yeah, there was a lot of folks that participated. And the focus of the release was, of course, just to basically update the framework so that it was fully compatible with .NET 10, but also take advantage of some of the new features that .NET had to offer when it came to Blazor and ASP.NET. So in terms of highlights of that release, we were able to successfully upgrade the framework to .NET 10. .NET 10, for those who are not aware, is a long-term support release, whereas .NET 9 was a short-term support release. Short-term support releases have a much shorter time frame in which Microsoft provides support. Long-term support releases are minimum of 3 years of support, so 3 years from the time it was released. So yeah, that's one of the main reasons. And so larger companies tend to focus on the long-term support releases and often skip the short-term support releases. So moving to .NET 10 as quickly as possible was important. Some of the features that were introduced in .NET 10, specifically around Blazor, were a new flag for Blazor Disable Throw Navigation Exception. This was a issue, I guess, that was first introduced in .NET 8, where if you were doing development within Visual Studio and you were running in static rendering mode and your code encountered a navigation manager.navigate to method, it would throw an exception in the IDE. Often developers thought that, that's a bug in the code. Realistically, it would only happen in a development environment within, like, when you're running in the debugger. It wouldn't happen in production, but still it was a bit of a problem. It was not fixed in .NET 9, and so it was fixed in .NET 10. And so that involved setting an option in the CS_proj file so that that exception is suppressed. And so Oqtane was able to take advantage of that. In .NET 9, Microsoft introduced a new solution file format, the SLNX format. Previously, for many years, the solution files were .slns and used a proprietary kind of format. The new SLNX format is XML-based, much more intuitive, much simpler to understand. And so it seemed like a good time for Oqtane to take advantage of that as well. So the framework moved to use the new solution file format, and also the templates that you can generate from within Oqtane for modules and themes also use the new SLNX format as well. Some time ago, I think it might have been in .NET 6 or .NET 7. Microsoft introduced a new approach for startup, and that was to basically get rid of the startup.cs class and put all of that logic into the program.cs. Oqtane had not done that migration because it wasn't required. And in .NET 10, they deprecated the iWeb host interface, which was an interface which was used by, I guess, older, web applications, earlier Blazor versions for bootstrapping the application. There's new, more modern interfaces that should be used now. And as part of making those changes, we decided that it was time to actually get rid of startup.cs and migrate all that logic to program.cs. The effort to do that ended up being not as significant as it would have been earlier because a lot of work had been done in Oqtane 6.2 to create the new Oqtane application template. And in order to create that template, a lot of the logic had to be modified in startup.cs. And so it just made it simpler to do this migration to program.cs. Another problem that originally, I guess, was introduced when Blazor introduced static rendering in .NET 8 was that the scroll position in the browser wouldn't always be retained or wouldn't behave consistently as what you're used to in regular web applications. So if you had a page with a lot of content on it and you navigated from that page to another page with a lot of content on it, sometimes the scroll position would be a bit problematic. Like you'd end up not being reset to the top of the page. Microsoft fixed this problem. Excuse me, I've got kind of a cold this week, so I've got a bad cough. So the scroll position issue was fixed finally in .NET 10, and so there had been logic that Oqtane had introduced to work around this problem in previous releases, some custom JavaScript that was injected into the page when you were using static rendering. We were able to remove that custom logic and just rely on the solution that Microsoft provided in .NET 10. So that was a benefit. Another major feature that was introduced in .NET 10, this was basically an enhancement to .NET Identity, and that was to support passkey authentication. Passkey authentication is sometimes called passwordless authentication, meaning you don't have to enter a username and password. It uses alternative mechanisms to authenticate you, like typically using some kind of an authenticator app, and that could use things such as biometrics such as fingerprints or eye scanning, or it can use PIN codes. There's many different ways that you can implement passkey support. But basically, the idea here is that you don't authenticate using a username and password if you're using this method. And so that was introduced in .NET Identity. And we thought that would be a useful capability to also make sure was available in Oqtane. So that was added in Oqtane 10. The Oqtane application template was introduced in Oqtane 6.2, which was, I guess, around maybe August or September timeframe. It took quite a lot of work in order to create a template in this format, but it provides a lot of benefits for developers because it provides a much simpler way to get the Oqtane framework installed and start building a custom application. Basically, you don't need to install Oqtane separately on your machine and then scaffold modules. It can all be done in one simple step. It also makes development easier because it handles NuGet references in the standard way that any .NET application does. So you don't have to kind of, open up NuGet packages, try to figure out what the static assets are, deploy those manually. Like it avoids a lot of the manual steps, or at least steps that required sort of customization in previous versions. And then for deployment, you can deploy an Oqtane application just like any other Blazor application. So there's a lot of benefits to this. And so in Octane 6.2 and 6.2.1, we had a couple of iterations of this, and sort of fine-tuning it, making it work consistently with the rest of .NET. And then with .NET 10, we wanted to, of course, continue to have an Octane application template, but we ran into some difficulties, and this was, I think, where the most challenges were in terms of upgrading to .NET 10. It turned out that the way that static assets are handled in .NET 10 are different than .NET 9, and that caused some problems in getting the Octane application template to work. Eventually, we were able to get some assistance from Microsoft, figured out that there was some obscure project setting that we needed to add to the project file. We also had to customize the targets or the props files, but eventually we were able to get it to work. So I'm happy that like the Octane application template, we were able to release that as part of Octane 10 in a fully functional form. I also posted a blog in the Octane blog about the Octane application template because in the migration from .NET 9 to .NET 10, there were some code changes that were made that impact the template. And so in order to make the template compatible with .NET 10, you would actually have to change a few files. So I outlined out all of those changes in the blog so that people who had created Octane applications using the older template were able to move forward. And one of the other things that had come up with the Octane application template is that if you wanted to extend like the Octane application that was created as part of that template with additional modules or themes, originally, like the original external module and theme templates that were part of Octane for many years now aren't really compatible with this Octane application template. That's because with the Octane application template, you're actually creating your code assets within this custom Octane solution. You're not creating them as separate projects, which are then, deployed into the Octane solution. So you basically build an Octane application by extending the solution itself. And so those external templates weren't applicable for that scenario. Luckily, very early in the Octane like product development cycle, there was this notion of internal templates, and support for that had been included in the framework ever since. We just didn't provide any internal templates because we kind of didn't want people to extend the actual Octane framework in that way because it makes upgrading very difficult. However, with the Octane application template, those become applicable once again. And so some small changes were made so that internal templates were fully supported and some templates were provided. And I'm going to demonstrate that. And then the last thing I'll mention is that we also took the opportunity to upgrade to latest version of Bootstrap, version 5.3.8. And that was included in Octane 10 as well. And so with that, I'm going to do a bit of a demonstration here. So I'm going to start with a command prompt, and I'm going to start with creating an Octane application from the Octane application template. So basically, I already have the Octane application template installed in my environment, the version 10 template. And so all I need to do is go .NET New, Octane app, and then give it my custom sort of name that I want to name the app, and it will template the application for me. So it went ahead and created that. And if I go into my file system, I can see that it was created right here. And you'll see that it uses the new SLNX format for the solution file. I can go ahead and I can open that with the latest Visual Studio Insiders, which I'm still using. You can use Visual Studio 2026 as well. And so you'll see that the Octane application template created 3 projects for me. The client, server, and shared project, which kind of emulate how how the framework itself works, and then how custom modules have always worked in the past. If we look in the Oqtane server project, we will see that there's just a program.cs class now. There used to be a startup.cs class as well, but all of that logic has now been consolidated into the program.cs. And so if you had created an Oqtane application using the template previously, you're going to have to, modify the main, like the program.cs, and get rid of the startup.cs. And I outlined all of this information in the blog that I posted. And so that's the program.cs. I also want to mention in the project file itself, this requires ASP.NET Web Assets option was something that was not required previously. It was not required in .NET 9. It is required in .NET 10. So this is kind of an obscure setting. And basically, it's necessary because the Oqtane application template itself doesn't contain any components in the server project. And so because of that, I guess .NET doesn't know what kind of it doesn't really understand that it's a Blazor application and that it needs to bootstrap it as a Blazor application. Somehow under the covers, .NET is inspecting, I guess, your project to determine if it contains Razor components and needs to bootstrap Blazor. But because this project doesn't contain any components, if you try to run it, it will run and it will render the UI, but the interactivity that Blazor requires won't be enabled. And so that's where this obscure setting comes into play. And so you have to include this in .NET 10. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to rebuild this solution. So it'll compile it. I guess the other thing, if we take a look at some of these files, you'll see that it includes package references to some .NET 10 bits, right? The very basic ones that are needed. It also includes a package reference to the Oqtane.client project and that version 10. And you'll see the same thing for the server project, right, using references to .NET 10, references to Oqtane 10, and also the shared project. All right, so we went in and we compiled it. We're getting some compilation warnings here, and this is because Oqtane supports multiple databases, and there's a couple of databases that did not have compatible .NET 10 versions when Oqtane 10 was released. Of course, one of those is MySQL, so that we use the Pomelo Entity Framework Core MySQL provider. And so it didn't have a native .NET 10 version. And so because of that, it throws a compilation warning. The Postgres provider, the NPG SQL provider, also didn't have a official .NET 10 version when we released Oqtane. So you're going to get warning messages about these providers. It's still going to build successfully, and it still will run successfully. But you have to be aware that if you want to use MySQL or Postgres, they're not really supported in this initial version. There already is a version of the Postgres provider, an official version for .NET 10, and that'll be available as Oqtane 10.01. The Pomelo Foundation is still working on their provider, and they haven't issued an official .NET 10 release yet. .NET 10 release yet, but I expect that will happen, within the next few weeks. And then these, once we've upgraded the dependencies, these warning messages will go away. It would theoretically, it would have also been possible for Oqtane to continue to use EF Core 9 rather than use EF Core 10. However, we wanted to be able to take advantage of the new passkey capability, and that's part of the identity bits as part of .NET 10, and that requires EF Core 10. So, when you have these dependencies, sometimes they can be in conflict with one another, and so that's why we have these warning messages. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this now. And by using the Oqtane application template, it automatically generates, unique port numbers from my application. And so it comes up with a unique port number that this is going to run under. We're running on Oqtane 10 on .NET 10. We'll just use the local DB, which is the SQL Server database that is used for local development. The SQL Server provider works fine on .NET 10. So does SQLite, for that matter. The only ones you kind of need to avoid are MySQL and Postgres in this version 10.0.0 world. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create an account. This will be my account that I'm going to log in with when I initially install. Schwan, that's not my name. All right, we'll use the default site template and we will install. So this will run all the migrations that are necessary on this database to make it compatible with Oqtane 10. And so once that's finished running, it's going to redirect to the application and show me the initial content. And so, the standard sort of look and feel of Oqtane. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to log in at this point using that account that I created. All right, so I'm logged into Oqtane now. We've got, of course, the fully functional installation now. And this is, using the Oqtane application template, which means I didn't have to install Oqtane on its own. It's basically utilizing Oqtane through standard NuGet packages. If I go to the admin dashboard and I go to module management, we always have the ability to create a module. The important thing is because I'm running within the Oqtane application template, the owner name is essentially the namespace, right? So I'm going to want to use a namespace which was consistent with what I chose when I created this application through the template. So I use mycompany.myproject10. That's what I called the template, or that's what I named the template when I created this application, or named the application. I'm just going to create a module called test within this application, and I'm going to choose default module template. This is in fact an internal template, not an external template. Still has the same name, still has the same exact functionality as the external template, but it's going to scaffold the code within my Oqtane application solution. So if I say create module, it created it, and it tells me that, it needs to be compiled in order to make it functional. All right, so I'm going to close that now. And if we go back to my solution and I look into my modules, I can see that it's scaffolded this folder for me with all of this code. Similarly, if I look in the server project, I'm going to see, that it created a controller. It created a manager. So it scaffolded all of the, code that for this particular test module that I wanted to create, but it scaffolded it within the solution, right? Within my Oqtane application that I had created from the application template. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build that now. So I can build this code, which will build, all of the additional bits that were just added. And then if I run this, I go back to my Oqtane application. Excuse me. And I go into my control panel, I can see that there's a test module here now, which is what it just compiled. I'll inject this module into the page, and it created an instance of this module here. I can click add, I can add some content, I can save it. So you can see that it's saving this information to the database. It edits it, right? So a fully functional module was added to my application. And then, of course, I can go back in and I can, create another module if I want to. And so, and similarly, there's exactly the same capability that's been added in the theme area. So if I go into theme management and I go into create theme, I can choose a template now. And so this is new in Oqtane 10, right? And the whole idea here was that it should be consistent, or so the methodology that developers use to create modules should be consistent, whether they are building um, or creating modules from within the Oqtane framework and like through a standard install of the Oqtane framework, or if they're using the Oqtane application template, right? There's different templates that are involved under the covers, but the process that a developer would follow to create a new module or create a new theme is consistent, right? And it generates consistent code, so that, it's regardless of the methodology you use, it's the same from a development perspective. All right, so next thing I want to show you is I'm going to go into user management and go into the settings area. And we're going to go into user settings here, and we'll see that there is a new option here for allow passkeys. By default, that option is not enabled. And this is like following the standard Oqtane upgrade kind of strategy where when new features are introduced that change the behavior of the application, we don't enable them by default, right? We allow people to opt into the new behavior if they want to. All right, so I'm going to enable passkeys support for this site. And so another thing to be aware of here is, of course, Oqtane is multi-tenant, so you can have multiple sites that are part of this same installation. By enabling passkey support, I'm enabling it just for this one site. If there's another site in my installation, I would have the ability to enable it or disable it on that site independently from this site. Right? And so that's how you can that's the way that basically all of the authentication features work within Oqtane, is you can control them on each site that's part of your installation. All right, so now I can go into my user profile, and you're going to see that the user profile layout has changed slightly in Oqtane 10. There's a new security tab that was introduced. And so some of the fields that were originally on the identity tab have been moved to the security tab. So the username, or basically the ability to specify your password or change your password, right? Originally was on this original identity tab, and it's been moved to the security tab now. In addition, there is a passkey area. And if you've created external logins for other like OIDC providers like Facebook, GitHub, like others, and you've enabled that through your site, there's another section that would be displayed as well, so that you have the ability to manage those external logins as well. So if I want to add a passkey, I can click add. And because I'm using a Windows machine, it comes up with the Windows hello, and I can enter my PIN code. I enter it correctly. So it recognized my PIN code, and now I have a passkey that I'm going to be able to log in with. So if I go navigate away from my profile and I log out now, so I'm fully logged out, and I want to decide that I want to log in again, we'll see that because I enabled passkey support, I now have this new button, use passkey, which appears below all the standard username and password entry. So if I say use passkey, it prompts me for it basically, again, this is Windows hello, asking me to use my PIN code. The problem is I've done so much testing on this machine and name things in like the same manner. They all have the same username, that it's a bit confusing as to which one I should choose. I'll choose this one, and I'll enter my code, and that didn't work because I chose the wrong one. So this wouldn't happen in a production environment. It's because as part of developing this feature, I had to try things over and over and over again. Okay, there, I chose the right one now, and I'm logged in through using just a PIN code, right? And I'm logged in as the host account. So that's how passkeys work within Oqtane. Under the covers, of course, it leverages the .NET identity system, which is what provided this new passkey capability. However, in order to implement passkeys in Oqtane, it was not straightforward, and that's because the basically the UI that is provided in identity in .NET 10 for for the identity system, it utilizes static rendering. So it uses like static rendered components. Um, Oqtane within the administrative user interface, like for example, this user profile, this is an interactive component. It's not a static component. And so the code that you would generate by using the sort of the scaffolded .NET identity, it uses forms and it relies on HTTP context, and it basically will only work in a static rendered page. Um, Whereas Oqtane is really designed to work in any render mode, right? And so in order to get, or in order to provide passkey support, we had to implement um, the UI aspect of the passkey system in a completely different way than the way that Microsoft had implemented. We still are using the underlying APIs on the server side, but on the UI side of things, it uses a completely different methodology. And I had a session at .NET Conf a couple weeks ago where I tried to kind of describe the differences in terms of what we had to do to make passkeys work using, interactive rendering. But that session, the sessions at .NET Conf were only 30 minutes long, and so it really wasn't enough time to cover everything. And so I'm going to have the opportunity in a few weeks to do a longer session where I'll explain passkeys in more detail in terms of how it was implemented in Oqtane. And that'll be maybe useful for other folks that are building interactive Blazor applications because they would have to do something very similar as what I came up with in terms of getting passkeys to work in interactive Blazor, because there is no examples that Microsoft provides on how to do that. So, and I should also mention that I'm pretty grateful that I had access to McKinnon Buck from the Blazor team at Microsoft to kind of help me out through a few blockers that I ran into along that journey. It's because in the end I was able to come up with a completely functional, secure solution, but it doesn't resemble what Microsoft provided out of the box in .NET 10. So I think that's the extent of the demo. I guess maybe the only other area that I wanted to mention is if I'm in user management, because Oqtane has like a centralized user management where all of your users can be listed. This is clearly like one of the value added features, I guess, that you would get with Oqtane as opposed to just using the .NET identity within like a standard Blazor application. So if you create a standard Blazor application in .NET 10, it will scaffold certain bits for you. It'll provide passkey authentication support, but you don't get a user management area where an administrator can log in, see all the users, manage them. Like that, that's just not part of the feature set that Microsoft provides, whereas Oqtane does provide that. So if we go into the user management, again, you'll see that there's a new security tab that's been introduced. And so those security features that are part of user management have been moved to the security tab. So we see the passkey. And so I have the ability that I can remove a passkey from a user's account. So if perhaps there's a user that's having difficulty with their passkey login, the administrator can come in here, find their account, and they can remove the passkey. And so that would allow that user to then create a new passkey for their account. Similarly, there's another section that would be displayed here if I had enabled external login, and I can go in and I can actually remove external logins for users as well now. That was a new capability that was added in .NET 10. Because previously in Oqtane, users were able to create external logins, um, but there was no way for the administrator to manage them. And so that was added in Oqtane 10 as well. And so that's like the main, I guess, features that I wanted to demonstrate. If we go back now to the slides for a moment. So Octane 10 was released November the 14th. I do expect that there'll be a maintenance release this month of Octane 10.01. There's already a number of small fixes that were introduced in 10.01 for various, maintenance types features that are part of Octane. Also, there's, the upgrade to the Postgres provider. I hope there will be an upgrade to the MySQL provider. Um, and in addition to that, one of the things that was also introduced in .NET 10 for Blazor was a new method called navigation manager.notfound. And this is for improved 404 handling. So if a visitor, if somebody browses basically to your site and browses to a path that doesn't exist, Octane would log that incidence, in the URL mapping so that you can see as an administrator that, certain URLs that don't exist are being hit and you can remap them. But it was redirecting to a friendly sort of 404 page that you have the ability to customize with your own content, but it was issuing a 302 redirect status code, back to the client. And that's not really the appropriate behavior. It should be responding with a 404 error code. And that's, this is something that SEO takes quite seriously. And so this new navigation manager.notfound ability that was introduced in .NET 10 for Blazor is supposed to handle the status codes properly. Ben Zhang was able to implement this. I would say that, we probably wouldn't have been able to implement this without Microsoft's help, because the basic examples that were provided around in the documentation for this feature didn't actually work in Octane. They threw exceptions. And so someone from the Microsoft team was helpful enough that they created a repo with a more functional example for, that emulated some of the characteristics of Octane. And with that, we were able to actually implement the feature. So that'll be in 10.01. Another feature that was implemented last week is in regards to static render mode. So as most of you are aware, if you're using Octane and you create a new site, by default it uses static rendering. And then you can also specify the interactivity so that you can have interactive Blazor components that are part of the statically rendered UI. That all works great. One of the challenges, however, with static rendering is that it doesn't support JavaScript in the most, I guess, natural way, in the most standard way. And so if you are migrating a website, a website meaning like it's mostly just static, like pages with static content, usually websites have utilized a lot of JavaScript references, for different functionality on the site, right? So they'll have a variety of different references to JavaScript libraries or components that they expect to use. And by default, when you're using static rendering in Blazor, there's a feature called enhanced navigation, which is enabled by default. And that enhanced navigation interferes with the behavior of JavaScript. It's not always noticeable right away. Like when you first navigate to a page, as an initial request, it'll get the JavaScript and execute it properly. But then if you navigate to a different page in the site and back to that page, it'll completely ignore the JavaScript that's on the page. And so you'll end up with some really weird behaviors. And that's like just a known behavior of static rendering with an enhanced navigation turned on. The reason why Microsoft did it this way is because I guess they assumed that people would be building web applications, like interactive web applications, more than building websites with Blazor. And so this enhanced navigation allows Blazor to have like a more interactive spa-like responsiveness, so that it has a more responsive UI than what is typical with a server-based application. Because most people are, if you're familiar with web forms or MVC or Razor Pages, right? They are not SPA applications, and they will do a full page refresh of the content every time you click or navigate to a new link. So enhanced navigation is intended to address that problem. However, if you're building just a regular website with a lot of content in Blazor, then you don't really need enhanced navigation. And so I've added now the ability on a site basis to be able to disable it. So, and if you disable enhanced navigation, you can still use static rendering just fine in Blazor. And JavaScript will work just fine. So your JavaScript references will work consistently the way that they always have done. However, you will get the full page refresh. So if you're migrating from, web forms or MVC, and you already had a full page refresh kind of model that you were using, you'll see no difference. Like it'll just behave the same way, and JavaScript will work. So it definitely does have some benefit. And so that's why this option was added, and it'll be available in 10.01. And I already mentioned the PostgreSQL provider was already updated, so that'll be in 10.01, and I'm hoping MySQL will be as well. So recent events, November 10th, there was a .NET Foundation Summit that was available to some of the .NET Foundation projects. I was able to participate. However, I was like traveling a ton in November, and so I wasn't able to do the session live. So I basically had to record the session in advance from my hotel room, send it to the organizer of the event, and then they were able to integrate it into the overall .NET Foundation Summit. So anyways, the recording is available on YouTube. And it's just it's a general overview of Oqtane, and it features some of the capabilities that are in .NET 10. Some of those things I just demonstrated again for you in this community stand-up. And that should say November 14th. That was during .NET Conf. I also was able to present a session .NET Scores a Perfect 10. That was, like I said, a 30-minute session outlining just basically the steps that were involved in migrating Oqtane to .NET 10. And so that recording is also available on YouTube. December 17th, I'm going to be hosting a webinar, which is basically just showcasing Oqtane 10 on .NET 10. And so this will be like the official public launch webinar for Oqtane 10. Likely it'll be also showcasing some of the features that are in 10.01, because I'm thinking that it will probably be released by then. I found out this morning that Dan Roth is willing to join as a co-presenter, which is awesome. He also was a co-presenter when we did the Oqtane 6 release webinar for .NET 9. And so that'll be great to have him join us. And the link for registering for that event hasn't been created yet, because this is all kind of happening really quickly. But it should be available shortly, and I'll be posting that on the Oqtane blog. And our next meeting is in January, like first week of January, which is 2026 already. And yeah, so with that, I think I can shift over now to take any questions that people have. All right, so great option for scaffolding modules, says Mark. Yeah, I think the most important thing there is that it's consistent because all of the videos and documentation that exists for Octane currently, when they talk about how to extend the framework, they of course they show the module management area, create module. And so for people who are using uh, the Octane application template, there was some confusion, right? When there was no templates there, and they were wondering like how they were supposed to follow along with the previous examples that were available. So now that will be possible. So that's great. How can we deploy Octane application template built application in IIS? Um, I mean, it would work. It works the same way as like any other um, like deploying any other Blazor application, right? So you um, you right click the solution and you say publish, and you have a bunch of different publish options there. You can publish to a folder, you can publish to a website, you can publish to Azure, right? And it will basically find all of the bits that need to be packaged together. And this is, of course, one of the big benefits of the Octane application template. It's because it's all based on NuGet, it's able to figure out all of the dependencies and it will build out that deployment package and then deploy that full package to whatever the environment is that you are trying to deploy to. So that is like one of the big benefits of using the Octane application template is, it's just it follows the standard deployment process. And I guess I should mention, like, so if you've created custom modules that are part of the Octane application template or custom themes, right? They're all part of that solution. If you've linked to like if you pulled in package references from NuGet to other NuGet packages that maybe you're utilizing as part of your modules, maybe even UI component libraries, right? You've just included package references within your Octane application because they're package references, it'll pick up all of that and build a deployment package for you that you can then deploy to your environment. That makes it super easy also to integrate it into your CI/CD pipelines. So just, it's a much more understandable process.